This meeting is being recorded.
So you'll have to acknowledge that we are recording. I want to say welcome to everybody. Hopefully you can all hear. If you have an issue, say something in the chat, or if you've got a question, go ahead and put it in the chat. This is the agenda for tonight. I'm really happy that you all decided to take some time out of your busy day and spend here with us. So I just want to start by saying that you're all in the right place. We are um, we're here to continue the second half of our Before You Pour a Bottle series of online meetings. I know there are quite a few of you um, who want to move into more responsible sales and practices by getting some business knowledge. This is the third and the last in the series of business related online learning circles. So I think we should, move on to the next slide here. I'm hoping we can all go through. This shouldn't take very long because there's only a few of us here. If you can say your name, how many years you've spent in beekeeping, and what you hope to learn. I will also take some notes, and we can probably, with a group as small as we are, we can probably just ask during the session. So I will go first, and then I will have Value would go next. And then I will just keep calling out people as we go. So I want to say hi, I'm Julia. Thanks for joining me. This is a photo of me about a year ago at an Earth Day event. I've had bees in my family for 18 years. Um, and something I'm hoping to learn is if I could present other topics to you that you are having trouble finding information on, so I can maximize this grant, which is based on business topics for beekeepers. So let's do Val, and then after Val, let's do Shelley after that.
Hey, good evening. This is Val Just, and John will be joining here shortly. John and I have been beekeeping since 2015, so what does that make it? 11, going on 11 years. And I'm just hoping to learn something from you guys tonight, so I'm looking forward to having some engaging conversation.
Very good. Thanks for sharing. So let's do Shelley, and then after Shelley's done, if we could have Joyce go after that.
I'm not sure how to get my camera up. Can you hear me?
We can hear you just
Okay.
fine.
Starting my fourth year, I live on the east side of Iowa. Um, that's about it.
What are you hoping to learn?
Just more about labeling and bottling. I'd like to just start selling maybe a farmer's market or just a little stand outside my house or something.
Okay, I think you'll find something valuable here. Okay, Joyce, and then Sean will go next. You want to unmute yourself, Joyce? I'm going to see if I can do it. I don't know if I can do it. Okay, and if you don't have oh, there you go. All right, and you maybe don't have a mic. You can always put it in the chat for us, Joyce. So let's do Sean, and then I don't know if Nancy's going to end up joining us or not. So if Nancy can't go, then we'll have John go. So Sean, go ahead and say hello.
Yeah, so I'm Sean Michaels, and this is my fourth year, and I too would like to start selling at a farmer's market. And I'm just a sponge whenever it comes to bees. I can't learn enough.
Very good. All right. It looks like Nancy is having notes taken instead of her attending, or maybe she's attending later. That's pretty common when people have this automatically connected to their computers. Their note takers will come and join in their stead. So, Joyce, if you can't speak, is John
Yep,
ready
I'm
to
right
go?
here. Hey, Julia, I'm here. Thank you.
Oh, perfect.
Yep, hi. I'm John, and Val mentioned we've been in beekeeping for about 11 years. My uncle, I had a close grandpa, the dog in the background. Sorry about that. My grandpa's uncles that were in beekeeping many years ago. We decided to get into it, and we love it. We learn every day, and I'm just excited to be on tonight. I learn every time I get on one of these groups here. So I'm gonna push the dog in the background and I'll be right back.
Very good.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so let me go back. I think that's everybody. So let me go back to our acknowledgement slide. I am going to find it here. All right, so before we go any farther, thank you, beekeepers, for saying hi. If anyone joins later, we'll get to meet them as they join. Our funding is what makes these online learning circles possible. So there's a partnership grant that I have with North Central SARE and the Iowa Farmers Union. Farmers Union is the fiscal agent here, and they use cooperation and education and legislation as their core tenets. And Farmers Union has played a big part in showing me how the USDA and IDLs can be partners with farmers rather than working against farmers. Something that also really helped me see beekeeping as having a place in agriculture. So this is a little slide about the work that I do. So the work for this project originally was all supposed to occur in the year 2025. And when I knew that I would be able to have an extension to continue working into 2026, I took the reviewers' feedback into account, and they wanted me to reach people virtually. So that's what 2026 is about. I want to really help beekeepers in particular. Like I said, we're frequently absent from the general agriculture events, such as Practical Farmers of Iowa or Iowa Farmers Union, although you would be very welcome if you joined. During well, actually, this January at Practical Farmers, I had lunch with a former extension agent, and we were just kind of talking like, why are beekeepers left out a lot? And we think it's just a misalignment of seasons. We think that's a big factor in this. So to get beekeepers on a more level playing field with our other table food producers, I have this series of online meetings. The ones that are crossed out here are available on YouTube with my YouTube channel. And you should all be able to find that at juliecash.com, my website, or my YouTube channel. I will usually have links sent to you every month. I send out a monthly email if you're not already on the list. I think you all are on the list, except maybe Joyce would be new. I think you're actually all on there. If I look at it, I would know for sure. But when we are done with this meeting tonight, you can email us. You can email me as the presenter, or John and Val. There will also be a survey. It's only 3 questions. You will be, oh, it looks like I froze. So you will be anonymous in the survey. So anonymous survey, 3 questions. It'll just automatically pop up. The people who fund the grant, they appreciate seeing results from work when I do outreach like this. So again, this is kind of how we're going to go through the rest of the night. So there's the presentation, and then we did not get any questions submitted beforehand. So I am going to quit sharing my screen so that Val can get her slides up, and then we'll kind of go from there. Oh, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to put myself on mute so that you can go ahead and talk. And I
All
will be
right,
watching the chat
good.
box. Thank you.
Thanks, Julia. I think your series is absolutely wonderful, and I think you give back to the beekeeping community tremendously. I've always appreciated everything that you do. All right, so we're going to talk tonight about producing a quality product as well as the presentation of your product. And you know, if the quality of your product isn't up to par, it doesn't matter how well your presentation of your product is, it's going to be tough to get customers coming back after they've bought. So that's why we're going to talk about first kind of the extraction process up to bottling, and then we'll move into the presentation of your product. So we're going to talk about extraction and beyond, bottling and storage, FDA label requirements, labels and presentation, business basics, and then we're going to have a learning circle discussion. So a little bit about us. John's keeping our puppy quiet right now. We have a puppy that's
But I'm here.
rather rambunctious, but he'll be here to contribute to any questions or any content. So John has a BS in the dairy science, so he's been in the food industry for ever since he graduated from college, which was many years ago. So that food quality background really has helped us to develop our quality assurance program here for our honey. I have a bachelor's of science in agronomy. I was employed with Wells Fargo for a number of years and I retired a couple of years ago. I was in the executive complaints department, which puts customer service as a primary focus for me, no matter what business role that I'm in. We've talked about this earlier. We've been in beekeeping since 2015. We started our Just Iowa Honey business in 2017. And both John and I are passionate about all pollinators. I've worked together with another person in our SEBA beekeeping club to build a Bees and Beyond pollinator program for second graders. That's just rolling out now. One of my favorite projects that I've worked on. So Bob Binney, we're going to talk about him. I've got a little bit of information on him on I think the next slide. But one of his quotes is, "As with most food, fresh is best and time is not on your side." And so if you've been in beekeeping at all for any length of time, you can recognize the validity of that statement. The longer you store your honey, the quality diminishes, the aroma, the color, the taste, and then the impact on the salability of your product is impacted with crystallization. And depending upon the glucose and fructose levels in your nectar, that impacts when your honey starts crystallizing. So you'll need to make some challenging decisions at some point about heating your honey, and we'll talk more about that as we walk through these slides. So here's Bob Binney. So he had a really good article on the processing of honey in bee culture. So some of the resources for this information came out of his article. He's been in the honey business for about 40 years. He runs about 2,000 colonies out of Georgia. And he's been the president. He was in several different states before he landed in Georgia, but he's been the president of the state beekeeping organizations for several different states. So he's got some background behind him. John Skinner is a professor at the University of Tennessee. He did a study, I think it was funded by the USDA, on heat and raw honey. So I'll have some information there to share. I also derived some of the information from the National Honey Board as well. So the quality of the honey, the responsibility for that transfers from the bees to the beekeeper at the time of extraction. So the bees were in charge of the quality of the honey up until that point, but as you extract your honey, that responsibility transfers to you. You can spend a lot of time and effort and money on your honey presentation, meaning your bottles and your labels and your packaging. But if your product doesn't shine, then and you're not real educated about those components of the quality of honey, you could potentially may not have returning customers. So it's just important to understand your role in the quality of your product. So what I'm going to be sharing tonight is just kind of the evolution of our business. So I don't have a business degree. I've got one in agronomy. I'm not a graphic designer, but I'm a curious George. And I just dug in. I'm also exceptionally frugal. So I dug in and, did a lot of research on, branding and business methodologies. And so I just applied that to the little tiny business that we have. And so what we're sharing here tonight is kind of our journey and some of the lessons learned as we went along over the last 11 years. So this is a picture. We just acquired this uncapping tank. Before that, I had a little plastic decapping tank. We used to extract in our kitchen when we first started out, and that was almost comical, but I would sit with just a small little uncapping I'm going to call it a bucket or a container. And it just slowed everything down. And we got to the point, we've got 30 hives typically every year. We produce anywhere between 1,800 up to 2,500 pounds of honey. And to try to extract that amount of honey just using the first equipment that we bought was becoming challenging at best. And we found that week that we were extracting, we were terribly grumpy. And so in order to save the marriage, pretty much, we had to upgrade our equipment. And this is just a picture of that. So this is a Maxent stainless steel uncapping tank and tray. And it'll hold, I believe, if you don't put the basket in it, I think it holds about 30 plus frames. So you can uncap them, let them drain, and then it's got a sloped floor and it drains down towards that filter that you see at the end. And this has saved us a lot of time for extraction. So just one component that has worked well. The second thing that we bought a few years ago is called the Harmony Uncapper. And I've got a little video to show you how it works. But again, we were using just a small plastic decapper. We upgraded 2 years ago. And so we use this a lot. We don't get as much wax with this contraption as what we used to do when we were slicing the top layer of wax, but it's been such a time saver that it's been okay. So here is just a tiny little video of how this works, and it uncaps on both sides. So it's got little prongs in there that just punch holes in all the hexagons. And so that's how that works, again, called the Harmony Uncapper. And then we moved up to, we started off with a manual extractor where I was kind of laying across it as it moved across the kitchen floor. I'm sure that would have been comical had someone taken a video of that. But this is what we've upgraded to. So this is we do like the Maxent brand, but I'm sure there's tons of others that work just as well. But this is a 20 frame. And so this has really sped up our production as well.
Okay.
Whoops. Let's see if I can keep going. So how do you produce a high quality product? You're selling a food product. So how good the honey is for the folks that are buying it from you depends on how we process it and store it. Your customers are putting trust in you to sell a quality product. So at the time of extraction, the honey is at its peak flavor, aroma, and clarity. And I'm sure that if you've been in beekeeping at all even for a year or two, that you've noticed as we round the calendar to the new year after you've extracted in August, that your honey starts changing color, the clarity, it gets more cloudy. And, depending upon the level of glucose to fructose, you could have started crystallization even as early as October or November. Linden honey is noted for that. So some of the things we're going to talk about, the components are the moisture content as it relates to the yeast spore count, flavor, aroma, and color, your choice of storage containers, what's the appropriate temperature based on Skinner's work for the USDA to maintain those enzymes and antibacterial benefits, and then of course cleanliness. So moisture content was number one. That moisture content for grade A honey is dictated by the USDA. The top threshold for moisture content is 18.6%. But between 16 and 17% is a good moisture level. 18.6 is legal, right? But you can find, when we start talking about yeast, you'll find that the moisture content really does matter. And that if you can get it between 16 and 17, that's a good idea to do that. So the bees fan and tend the honey for weeks, trying to keep that moisture content. But it's hygroscopic, and so it absorbs moisture from the air. So when we pull in our frames in the garage, we cover those up with plastic over the supers, the uncapping tanks and buckets. I've even got a hygrometer in the garage so that I can understand what the moisture, what the humidity is in the air. And then you use a refractometer to test those moisture levels while you're extracting or before you extract. So if you harvest frames that are about 90% capped, 90% plus, you should have a good thick honey by all intents and purposes. Supers with extensive uncapped cells, Bob Binney recommended that you should remove that moisture before you extract because it's possible to pull that moisture down off of the combs by putting them in a warm, sealed room with a dehumidifier. He's indicated that that's the only time to do it because otherwise you have to use a honey dehydrator. But John has actually put our extracted honey buckets in a closed off room with a dehumidifier, and we've gotten our moisture down that way as well. But your moisture content is important. So why is it so important? Well, number one, because there's a legal limit. Number two, yeast can cause fermentation in high moisture honey. And you need to, in order to prevent that, you need that type of a growth, that yeast and fermentation that is prevented through lower moisture. Primary sources of yeast are, it's all out in the soil and the flowers. The bees bring it in with the nectar and the pollen when they come into the hive. The yeast count can impact that fermentation even at low moisture count. So if it's got a spore count of 10 per gram it needs to be 18.6 or lower. But if you've got a high yeast spore count of over 1,000, you need to have moisture levels at 17% or lower, or you can potentially get fermentation of your honey. It's everywhere, yeast is. It's absolutely everywhere. It's in your apiary, it's in your equipment, and it's airborne in your honey house. So it's something that you've got to pay attention to, if you will. Now, the yeast activity will stop when the temperature is below 52 degrees, but once that temp gets back up, the activity of that yeast starts moving again. So the second component is the flavor, aroma, and color. Those are all impacted by temperature. So for instance, if you've got a bottling tank and you're keeping that temperature at 90 degrees consistently to keep your honey so that it's not so, right now I can't think of the word, but thick. Just an increase of that temperature will triple that rate that the honey darkens. And so right now we're, mid-March and we've got 2 wildflowers that have turned very dark. They're very pretty, but a lot of people like lighter honey. And it does get more, the taste of it does get more robust. It kind of loses that, that really clear, mild taste as it darkens. So that prolonged warming in that warming tank will degrade all 3 of these characteristics of honey. Now, cold honey degrades slower than warm honey. So really freezing temps are your best friends. So if you decide to take your extra buckets down to the basement, and they're probably going to crystallize because it's colder in the basement, but that's one of your best defenses against some of this deterioration that we're talking about. So your storage containers. We started off using food grade plastic buckets. I like the taste of our honey better when it's stored in stainless steel. I honestly can tell the difference. Honey, the acidity due to some of the enzymes in the honey is around 3.9%. So it's an acidic food product. And that honey reacts with most metals except stainless steel. Steel and iron are considered especially bad because they can rust and ruin honey. Recommend food grade stainless steel. But you can also use food grade plastic as well. When bottling with plastic, the bottles that are designated as PETE is considered one of the best choices. We bottle about 98% of our honey in glass. I like the environmental impacts of glass. I also think that it tastes better. If I take a milk product, for example, that's stored in plastic, if it's stored in light a lot, it will oxidize. And I truly believe after storing some of our honey in plastic up here in my kitchen, I do believe that that plastic impacts the oxidation of the honey. I didn't read that anywhere, but I can taste the difference when I've stored it in plastic as opposed to glass. So heat and raw honey. This is some of the information that I gleaned from John Skinner's information when he was researching heat and raw honey. So if you're producing more than a few buckets of honey and selling to customers long after you extract in August, at some point you may need to consider heat in one form or another, unless you have customers that are perfectly fine with buying crystallized honey. I do have people that know their honey is going to crystallize. They're not concerned about it. They find a means to use it. But I have other customers that if they find out that our honey is crystallized, that it really stalls them from buying our honey. So heat degrades honey, and it has an effect on the enzymes and the antibacterial properties, plus what we've already talked about, the color, the flavor, and the aroma. So enzymes equal energy, if you can think of it together like that. And in order for honey to be raw, that enzyme activity must be present. So destroying your enzymes, and we're going to talk about that here, destroying the enzymes through heat kind of leaves you in a compromised position if you're putting raw honey on your product. So there's 3 notable enzymes in honey. One of them is invertase, and that helps the nectar be able to hold more solids, therefore making it more stable. Glucose oxidase lowers the pH of honey to an average of 3.9%, which is an acidic product. Both of these enzymes help stabilize nectar while ripening and contribute to the antibacterial properties of honey. I don't know if you've sounded like several of you were going to just start selling your honey, but a lot of times people want to know what the benefits of honey are, and I have always talked about the antibacterial, the antioxidant properties of honey. But if I'm destroying those enzymes with high heat, it's really tough for me to, with a straight face, to be talking about antibacterial and antioxidant properties of honey. The other enzyme is diastase. Its activity is easily measured. It's used by some importers and packers to tell how much heat honey has been exposed to. So again, enzyme activity stops when the honey is held at freezing, but it returns when it's warmed back up. It does not ever return when the enzymes have been destroyed by heat. Almost all of those enzymes are introduced by the bees, and they'll all break down when liquefying crystallized honey in a microwave or at certain temperatures that we'll be talking about. So here's what John Skinner found as he researched raw honey and heat applications. And I'm going to talk about the national, do I have that coming up here? I don't think I do. So the National Honey Board always, ever since I've been in beekeeping since 2015, you could go out to the National Honey Board website and find out how they defined raw honey. And when John and I first started in 2015, they defined it as honey that hadn't been heated over 110 degrees. And so I felt really good because I was, if our honey would crystallize, I would decrystallize it. We've got the bottling tanks. We would keep it at about 100 to 102. It'd take several days to decrystallize that honey. But I felt good about that because I felt that after reading the National Honey Board information, that heat wasn't going to impact the quality of my honey at all. So I felt good about that. And then I'll say maybe a year or two ago, maybe 3 years, I went out to just touch base with it again to make certain that, things were still status quo. And they had changed that heat reference. They'd moved it from 110 degrees down to 104. But I still felt good because we can control the temperatures on our bottling tanks, and I was below 104. So I still felt like I was credible, that I was credible to my customers. I was credible to the bees because I wasn't destroying all the work that they'd put into it. So I still felt good about heating it up to 102. Well, about a year ago, when I was preparing this presentation, I thought I had better check just to make sure the National Honey Board hadn't changed it, especially after I read John Skinner's research. Well, I went out and they have no temperature associated with raw honey at all. They've removed any temperature reference, and I've got it upcoming how they define raw honey. But that was the background. I wish I would have saved all those screen prints. I didn't. It's by memory. But I think my memory for that is pretty good because I was feeling so good about how we were managing the quality of our product, because we really revere our bees, and we just don't want to, we want to provide the best quality product because we know how hard they work. So here's John Skinner's research. So in heating honey up to 98.6, which is, you know, a regular temperature on a thermometer for humans, that in heating it up to 98.6, it causes the loss of nearly 200 components, part of which are antibacterial. So there's all my bragging about antibacterial properties. In the past few years when I was heating up my honey to 100 or 102. Heating up to 104 destroys invertase. Heating up to 122 for more than 48 hours turns the honey into caramel. And I can attest to that because we heat up our honey for creamed honey, and it does. It tastes like a caramelized product. Heating honey higher than 140 degrees to 160 for more than 2 hours will cause rapid degradation. Any large temp fluctuation, like 10 degrees Celsius, causes decay. So we'll talk a little bit more about that upcoming when we look at some definitions from the National Honey Board. But I'm going to move, for the time being, I'm going to move on to cleanliness, which was our last component of a quality product. And this is just an example of a good friend of mine. He shared this with me, and this was from the state fair. He had brought his honey into the state fair, very proud of his honey, as we all are. And this is the report that he got back from the state fair judge. So I'm going to point out that she found debris in his honey, as well as pieces of fur in his honey, which automatically gave him a 0 there. And so imagine, you know, imagine your customer finding that. And I'll tell you a story about that. Customer service is absolutely a massive need for me. It's really what I need to provide just because of all my work in a complaint department at Wells Fargo for so many years. But I had bought these small little hex jars, and we use them to do, because we keep all of our honey separate. We've got 5 different bee yards, and we have varietals. And so we keep them all separate, and then we label them as such, the bee yard that it's coming from, and then the kind of honey that's in there, whether it's black locust or linden honey. Sometimes the bees combine black locust and linden. You can taste it in the honey, and then all of our different wildflowers from each one of the bee yards. And so I had bought all these little hex jars because we do sample packs. And I had a new customer who was just enthralled with our honey, and he kept, you know, coming back about every 2 weeks buying a pound of honey, but he still hadn't tasted all of our varietals because it was early right after extraction. And I had bought these hex jars, and when I opened them up out on my porch, all of the styrofoam was totally broken down into tiny little pieces. And they didn't tape shut all of my, I think I had probably 6 or 7 cases of those tiny little hex jars in there. They hadn't taped those shut. So all of this crumbled styrofoam had gotten into those bottles. And so I pulled it all out, recognized that I was going to have to kind of blow the styrofoam off and then wash them out and go through that whole process to make certain that I didn't have any problems with the honey that I was selling to my customers. Well, I must have missed a box, and I ended up in a hurry packaging up a varietal pack to this new customer who was so enthralled with our honey. and there was a couple of pieces of styrofoam in each one in two different jars. And it stopped. I tout our product as being a quality product, that John's in the food industry. And here we were, selling a product that had a couple of pieces of styrofoam in it. And quite honestly, that would have turned me off as well. So that was lessons learned for me to, spend more time to make certain that what I'm claiming to be is indeed true. So let me catch up here. Let me see where I'm at. All right, so here's what I promised, the National Honey Board definition of raw honey. So they define raw honey as it exists in the beehive or as obtained by extraction, settling, or straining without adding heat. Now they do state that they don't have any legal authority over the definition of honey, but they do have a lot of clout. And so that is their definition, and that's one that I have tried to live by ever since we came on board, with our honey business. And then I just talk about the National Honey Board and what I saw in terms of the changes they made in the definition with those temperatures. And if anybody's raising their hand, I'm sorry, I'm not able to see that. Julia, is that something that you monitor for?
It is something I monitor for, and there has not been a hand raise or any questions in the chat box. But
Okay,
there certainly is that raise your hand function available to everybody attending.
okay, all right. So here's just some heat and storage practices or observations that I tried to combine. So we bought our first Maxent bottling tank with that immersion heater in 2020, and we ended up with 4 tanks like that. And again, we maintain a temperature around 80 degrees consistently, but if it had crystallized, we moved it up to 102, and we were under the temperature recommendations until late 2024. We did notice that the honey would start darkening around March of the annual honey cycle. And to me, the honey cycle is from August until the end of July when I extract again. And by June, it's really dark. So I'm losing a lot of the quality that I had when I first extracted. And that honey flavor, when you first start out and you've extracted and you're tasting all the different varietals that you've extracted from your different bee yards, oh, it's just so delightful because you can taste all of the ambiance of all of those different nectars that the bees have gathered at each one of our different bee yards. But I'm starting to notice, in March and beyond, that it's losing some of that distinction, and it's all kind of just tasting like honey that you may buy off of the grocery store. And so the varietals are still distinguishable, like our linden honey. If you're familiar with linden honey, it's got either a citrus or a minty taste to it. Linden honey is noted for its help with inflammation as well as detoxification properties. But it's starting to disappear as we're rounding that corner into summer. And it's not as tasty as it was when we first extracted. Black locust is another one, if you've ever tasted black locust or harvested it. It's a very, very mild, almost a white honey, but that starts darkening as well as we round the corner into the new year. But it still has, right now in March here, it's still very distinguishable. And it's because we've changed our methodologies around temperature. We don't keep it constantly at 80 degrees. We turn it down to where there's no temperature unless we need to pump it up a bit because it's just become so, oh, Julia, I can't think of the word. What is it when the honey is so thick?
Viscous?
Thank you. I could not think of that word because of the viscosity of the honey, and it's really hard to pour. So here's some of our lessons learned. We can control a number of the varietals that impact the quality of our honey. The crystallization is, and most of our customers preferring a liquid product, is one of the most challenging variables. We've made changes to our practices based on what we know. Cold honey degrades slower than warm, and freezing Temps are your best friend against that deterioration. So we've changed where we store our surplus honey buckets. We've also changed our process in keeping low heat constantly in the bottling tanks. We only use that low heat when it's absolutely necessary. But here's one of the things Bob Binney said in the article that he wrote for Bee Culture. He said, I admit that when it comes to processing honey, producing a good quality product can sometimes be challenging. There'll be mistakes made and lessons learned the hard way. You may have to compete with people that have no problem with mislabeling and misleading customers. Let your quality and service speak for itself. And remember, it can take years to earn a good reputation, but only it takes a few seconds to lose it. All right, so I'm going to stop there. Honestly, Julia, I can't see if anybody's raising their hand or not, but just giving people a few minutes. Otherwise, we'll keep going.
Yeah, I would say keep on going.
All right, storage and bottling. So there's a lot of different storage options, and we're talking, after you've extracted. We'll be talking about bottling here shortly. So here's some of your options. You've got a 5-gallon bucket with a honey gate, runs about $40. This is one that we bought from not Dedant, but Man Lake. Fairly easy to move around, great for storage and bottling. You can heat it up with a blanket, which I have a picture coming up, but it conflicts with the raw honey standards. The gates work well for a while, but then they start leaking. Pretty soon you've got ants gathering around your honey pop and the sides of the gate, sometimes missing the bottle, and it can be messy and worse, wasteful of the work that your bees have done. So this is a gate that comes from Hilco. I love Hilco's products. We have not had a bit of problem with this gate. It doesn't leak. It's a little bit hard to open, but no leakage, nothing gathering underneath trying to gain benefit of your leaking honey. Obviously, again, you can heat it up with a blanket, but it conflicts with kind of what we talked about. John recommends food grade grease on the valve. The valve handle does extend beyond the bottom of the bucket, so it needs to be on a bench or a cart. So what we do is I bought some cheapo furniture movers out at Menards. So you know what I'm talking about. They're, maybe a foot by a foot, and they've got wood slats across them with casters on the bottom, and people use it for moving around their furniture. We put ours on those so we can move them around really easily and don't have to try to lift 50 or 60 pounds all the time. So this bucket and this gate runs about $45 at Hilco. Then what we've started in the last, I'll say 4 years, my son started it. He didn't know what to get us for Christmas, so he got us one of these Hilco stainless steel tanks with a gate on it. It's got a welded stainless steel gate. It has a sloping floor so that the honey flows towards the gate. It comes with 2 strainers so that you can extract right from your extractor and strain your honey and put it right in the stainless steel tank. The one that we have is 110 pounds. I'm sure they've got bigger ones, but we have about 5 or 6 of these, and we continue to add to our inventory. My goal is to get rid of the plastic. I'm just not a plastic person. It goes against my environmental core. But again, we move these around with furniture movers, and it works great. So here's some of your components for heating. There's a band heater. I didn't know about these until I went out and started searching on the internet. It's not adjustable, so you stick it on and it heats up to whatever it's going to heat up to. And my reading tells me that it will melt the pail. So if you'd have to use a stainless steel pail on it. We bought this bee blanket thinking it was awesome. We bought it before everything that we know, and there's no control on it. And we know after putting it on a bucket that it heats up over 110 degrees. So there's no gauge on it. You can't control the heat. I have one really cheap if anybody wants one. These are the bottling tanks that we have. They cost about $1,700, $1,800. They're 18 gauge stainless steel. They're really nice. They've got a double wall and then you use distilled water. It's an immersion heater and it does decrystallize the honey. We are doing our best to keep our honey below 98 degrees. It takes days for it to decrystallize. It eventually decrystallizes, but there's still small little crystals in there. So you can't quite get to where it's totally decrystallized below 98 degrees. At least we haven't been able to yet. But these are great. They've got a temperature adjustment. You can, you'll know what you're heating your honey up to. It's also comes, or you can buy separately a no drip valve for ease in pouring. That valve is half price when you purchase with the tank. It does not drip. It's like those Hilco gates, and we love these. It comes in a lot of different gallon options, and again, use food grade grease when you need to use it on the valves. So you've extracted, so what comes next? Well, you need to allow your honey to settle for 4 to 5 days before bottling. You'll get bubbles created during the spinning of the extractor and they'll rise to the top and the honey will be clarified. If there's a lot of foam and wax at the top, you can use saran wrap across the top to clean off the debris. We did do that in the early days because we thought, you know, that's what everybody was doing. You know, this is just me being the odd person out. I don't like plastic. I just don't care for it. And so I just skim it with a really good spatula that works really well for it. So is it normal to see bubbles inside a freshly bottled jar? Yep, and they'll come to the top in a day or two. Try to hold the bottle as close as you can to the gates because you'll lessen the drop between the bottle and the gate so that you don't get as many bubbles. Another good thing if you're going to be selling, you know, and bottling your honey is to have a legal for trade scale. We ended up with 3 of them. I've got a really large one because we do sell occasionally honey by the bulk. So we've got one that goes up to 150 pounds and then 2. It doesn't matter how many you have, just as long as you have one. But ours go up to, the other 2 that we have are 30 pounds is what they go up to. They're called NTEP, Legal for Trade. That's the National Type Evaluation Program. That's what you want to be looking for. If you're going to farmers markets and pouring honey, if you're going there and it's already poured, you don't need to worry about this. But if you're going, we take ours with and then pour because we've got different varietals. So you need a scale with rechargeable batteries if you're going to be doing that. So I'm sure you all know this, but you just weigh the bottle prior to filling, then you zero or tear it out. You fill the bottle and then you weigh to ensure that the bottle's been filled, or you can put your scale right underneath your bottling tank, put your bottle on it, and then just watch to when it hits the unit that's on the label, if that makes sense. So when we first started, of course, I wanted to try everything. I wanted to try all different kinds of bottles, and pretty soon I was so stocked up on bottles, I had no room for anything else. So as we progressed, I started limiting myself and trying to be a little bit more logical started applying, you know, pretty much business justifications when I was buying bottling. So I'd ask myself, it was a must-have, a should-have, or is it a nice-to-have? So if you have a lot of bottle offerings, you need storage, plus it can be financially draining. Some of those bottles, like with the Muth jars and some of the specialty bottles, they're expensive. And you have to ask yourself, just how many 1-pound options do you need? And how many net weight options will you offer? We were offering just odd at the beginning, just odd offerings. And so I have boiled it down. I keep, it's called a 0.18. I don't know what the ounces are, but it's 0.18 pound hex jar, a little tiny mini jar for our sampler packs, a 1/3 pound hex. Now those last 2 hex jars are for event favors. If I wasn't doing event favors, I probably wouldn't offer those. I would start off at a ½ pound, a 1 pound, a 2 pound, a 3 pound, and a 6 pound, and try to keep it at minimal. We also learned very quickly to think of label applications. So as I was looking at the bottles, I'd look to see, do I have enough room for 3 labels? Because I need the primary label, I need a warning label, about infants, and then I need a varietal because I'm selling different varietals of honey. And then sometimes I even need the Iowa food law label, like for creamed honey. Will the labels easily apply to the jar or bottle that you're buying? And will they present professionally and refined, or are you going to look like you're trying to squeeze too much information and a variety of labels into a very small space? So do better than I did. Don't buy everything that you see just because you can. Try to logically think through what your basic needs are, and if it's a should have, a must have, or a nice to have, would be my recommendations. So different bottling options. We do, 98, 99% of our business with glass, just because it's more environmental, and most of our customers want that, except for if they're shipping. And then I find that I've got some plastic orders. But we started off using the Queen line. I don't have a picture here of it, but I'm pretty sure you all know what that is. That's kind of the classic jar that people bottle their honey in. I learned that I like the Paragon jar, which is the picture that you see here to the left. It's a tall cylinder jar, and it has a really nice presentation. And I could get that in a 2.08. I couldn't get it just in a 2 pound. It's a 2.08, but my customers don't seem to care. And I really like the presentation of that. You can buy a skep jar, you can buy a glass honey bear, the squat bulb, honey pots, but tell me, I have bought those, and trying to get a label on something that's round and on the side of it, I mean, your only option is to really put it on the top of your lid. So I found very fast that some of those were not good buys. Hex jars are beautiful. They display beautifully. They're a great presentation. And then we call it the Whoppers. So we do a 3 pound and a 6 pound mason jar. And I tell people it's for those Winnie the Pooh like customers, but those are glass as well. So here's some of the unique bottling examples. This is a squat bulb. You can see this is all round, impossible to put a label on it. Just has to go on the top. Skep jar, it's a certain shape. And so now you're buying certain shapes of labels. You can't just use an oval or a rectangle. The embossed, the only place you have again is up on the top on the lid. And then this is one that a friend of mine is selling. What's wrong with that bottle? Can anybody tell me? This flounder bottle? What if your honey crystallizes in there? Do you see how narrow the top is? It's going to be really tough to get out. And I've got a couple of really bad buys of myself to show you as well. I mean, his bottle is very pretty. It presents very well, but a customer may be sorry that they bought it eventually. So plastic needs to be food grade. And remember, Bob Binney recommends the PETE. PET and PETE, they're both acronyms for polyethylene, and I'll let y'all figure out what that last word is. The PET is more rigid and it has a higher melting point than the PETE, so it's harder to squeeze out the honey. It's very rigid. It's the PETE, it's more flexible, and it's commonly used in packaging for food and other consumer products. I really like the inverted bottle because, honey takes a long time. It's kind of like ketchup. It takes, at least some ketchups, it takes a long time to sometimes get up to the top. And this way you can just keep it inverted and it comes out right away. So that's my favorite. And it also makes a nice presentation if you've got a nice label. We also use jugs. I buy mine from Spring Valley. They're just as cheap and as online, and I'm giving my local commercial beekeeper some business. We also buy bees from her. her and Kurt. But those are the plastics that we use. And these are just some examples. All right, we're going to move on to the FDA and label requirements.
Okay, you got 5 minutes left, 5 minute
Oh.
warning here.
Oh, golly. Okay. Um, so this just talks about, what the FDA requires in terms of your labeling on your labels. So for instance, you need to have pounds and ounces as well as metric weights. They need to be in the lower third of your front panel. You also need to have the word honey on your front label. And then it talks about the size of the font that it needs to be. So if you're just starting to make labels, make sure you go out and read the Food and Drug Administration, the labeling requirements out there. And I can send out hyperlinks to some of these resources as well. I'm going to kind of scoot through here. So, as you're looking to create your vision for your presentation, be a curious George. Go out and search the internet, look at your competitors' labels, and determine what you like. So originally, these two bottles down below, I loved that presentation. I thought it was awesome, but it's the same thing as the Flounder bottle that we looked at. Got a narrow neck, and it's going to be tough if you've got crystallized honey in there. And this was my vision. I never got to my vision, but I kind of sort of did. I got to the color palette, but I didn't get to the transparent labels. But remember, your brand tells your identity and your story. And you need to ask yourself what your market will support in terms of the money that you spend on your presentation. What's the market price of the honey in your area? If you're going to be shipping, maybe some of the fancier bottles will sell because the consumer is different around the United States. Are you building a website to where you're going to make it available, to a lot more markets? Just a lot of questions to ask yourself as you're trying to formulate your business. It's important to educate your customer about the crystallization of honey. I've got an educational card that goes with all of my orders. And then the National Honey Board, you can order promotional products from them, hang tags. All you do is pay for shipping, and I think it's $15, and you can get a whole year's worth of supplies. So where can you get your labels and where can you design them? So there's a company called Online Labels. They have a designing platform that once you've bought labels, you can use their designing platform. You can upload your own files and your own system fonts. They have weatherproof labels, which is important because honey is used in the kitchen. They also have the gold foil for the warning labels. Avery labels, the only Avery label that I use is for that 0.14 pound honey bear, that little plastic 2-ounce honey bear. I use Avery labels because it covers that label area. And then I use Canva and Indigo to create or enhance files or to create my labels. Legibility is important. Just a basic font, this Helvetica font is a good font. When you start using script, it's harder for people to read. And then if you can, try to buy your bottles so that you can reuse the same size label. So keep that so that you're not stocking so many labels. And then determine if you're going to use the warning label, because in my mind's eye, it reduces risk and liability for your business. And then what other labels do you need? Do you need the Iowa Food Law label? The only thing we use it for is for creamed honey. Here's some label examples. I never got to my vision. You can see down below here, this was my vision. But I got to my color palette, and then I paid Etsy. I paid a designer out on Etsy $50, and they created, I have another business as well, so I've had two created out there, and they've done fairly well. But if you do that, it's only $50, and even though I'm cheap, I can afford the $50. I'm gonna skip over this just a minute. So here's Canva application, is very user friendly. Over here to the right is the Bees and Beyond logo that I created in Canva. It's a graphic design for dummies. There's an annual cost for the pro version, but there's also a free version that you can use. And then Indigo is another thing that I do to alter SVG images. And again, so what differentiates you in a local market? Your types of products that you're offering. There's a lot of ways to set yourself apart. Your pricing, go low or high, determine what the market will bear. Your target customer, are you wholesale, retail, home business? Are you going to farmers markets? Your service differentiation, make sure to always think about the customer experience and customer education and engagement. You can innovate your offerings. You can be like Savannah Bee Company, where you're a global honey brokerage, or you can be a family business, which I love, and you tell your history. People love that. And one way I defined differentiation for John's and my business is I created just a little niche market, and I do favors for businesses, and they label these little hex jars, and so I create little favors for them. All right, Julia, I rushed through it, but I got there.
Yes, you did. I appreciate that. So this would be the time when your questions are welcome. And I know we have people who were coming to talk about labels, is that right? And then I think I also heard bottle choices. Is that right? Could I have people come off of mute or and come on camera and go ahead and ask specifics